May Almighty's peace be upon you, and very happy to meet you all again for the biozoology session. Actually, in this COVID time, we had got a happy news that 9 to 12 standard students can come to school for learning. Even then, we should not stop anything regarding learning. The learning process should continue wherever, whenever, whichever the situation is. My dear students, in our last class we discussed about immunology. So immunology, when we speak about immunology, it is the study of immune system. So immunity means the overall ability of the body to fight against a disease or pathogen. That is immunity. So our body should fight against a pathogen. Pathogen means disease causing microorganism. So we discussed so many viral diseases, bacterial diseases, fungal diseases, protozoan diseases, helminthic diseases. So these organisms, when they enter our body should fight against these microorganisms. That is immunity, and the study of immune system is called as immunology. So our body should produce something. Something should be produced that we call as antibodies. So when an antibody is produced, so when some foreign organism, some external agent enters our body, when a foreign organism like bacteria or virus enters our body, at that time our body will produce antibodies. So when an antibody is produced, when an antigen is entering, so this antibody is generated. Antibody is generated when something enters inside, isn't it? What is that which enters something? That is called as antigen. Antigen enters our body and antibody is produced. So remember this well. Antigen enters our body and antibodies are produced in our body. Okay. So this we discussed in our last class. And next is this immunity. When we speak about immunity, there are two types of immunity: innate immunity and acquired immunity. Innate immunity in the sense inborn. So by nature, so when a child is born, during the childbirth itself, this type of immunity will be present. So we discussed in our last class, 4 types of barriers are there in our body. One is anatomical barriers. Anatomically, there are some immune system. For example, our skin is a good example. Skin, mucous membrane. It stops the entry of microorganisms. That is anatomical. Then we say physiological barrier. Physiological barrier, what did you study in last assignment you wrote, isn't it? What are physiological barriers? Temperature, pH, acidity, some chemicals. Even the tears coming from our eyes is also a physiological barrier. Then we discussed about phagocytic barriers. So phagocytosis, by phagocytosis the antigens are killed. Okay, phagocytosis. Then fourth one, inflammatory barriers. So 4 types of barriers are there. And now in this video class, let's discuss about acquired immunity in detail. Acquired immunity. From the name itself, we can understand that it is acquired. After the childbirth, a person acquires some immunity. So that is called as acquired immunity. So some body's resistance is created by the specific pathogen. So in those conditions, our body it acquires some of the immune power. So how it happens? So let's discuss. So before discussing the types of acquired immunity, there are two components. This immunity, how this acquired immunity happens, there are two components. One is cell-mediated immunity. Cell-mediated immunity. Cell-mediated immunity. That is, the pathogens are destroyed. The pathogens are destroyed without producing antibodies. Antibodies will not be produced. Without producing antibodies, the pathogens will be destroyed by the cell using T cells, T lymphocyte cells. It happens. Okay, you would have discussed T helper cells are in HIV, isn't it? Likewise, T cells. Okay, those T cells. So now antibodies are not produced here. Antibodies are not produced here, but it will destroy the microorganism. This is called cell-mediated immunity, and they are called as natural killer cells. Natural killer cells, because automatically it kills, isn't it? It's a natural killer cells. The second one is antibody-mediated immunity. Antibody-mediated immunity. It is also called as humoral immunity. So what it will be? You can understand. Here, antibodies are not produced, isn't it? So how will be antibody-mediated immunity? Antibodies are produced. The immune system is boosted, or the pathogens are killed by producing antibodies. Here I said T cells or macrophages involved in this killing, isn't it? T cells. Here B cells. B cells. Okay, so this type of antibody mediated immunity is present in vertebrates, like human beings. In vertebrates, this acquired antibody mediated immunity is seen. Now, my dear students, when we speak about this acquired immunity, I would like to tell you one thing. Okay, only in a single line they have given, but you should understand it. That's why I'm explaining you. So when this acquired immunity occurs, okay, by killing, by producing antibodies, all. So there are some characters how these antibodies are produced. Some specificity is there. For example, cholera bacteria, Vibrio cholerae, is entering into the body. Okay, for that a particular antibody is produced. But for this cholera, one specific antibody only can be produced. Okay, and the same antibody cannot fight against Salmonella typhi, which causes typhoid. So some specificity is there. Same way, diversity is there. Diversity in the sense, same way what I said, for this organism one antibody, for another organism another antibody. So some diversity is there. Then third one, distinction or discrimination between self and non-self. This is our body's immune system. This is not external agent. That antibody should understand, and antibody understands. This is not that it will understand. Okay, self and non-self, that the antibody will understand. Fourth important thing, memory. So cholera, Vibrio cholerae enters the body. So our body produces some antibodies. Next time when the same Vibrio cholerae enters, the immune system, our body immune system understands, or it will have a memory power that this antigen has come earlier. So that memory is also very important. So we would not have thought all these things, isn't it? Of course, these are very, very important in immune system, immunity. So these are some of the characters of acquired immunity. Now let's discuss the types of acquired immunity. Acquired immunity. So these types, when we say, they are broadly classified into active and passive. Active acquired immunity and passive acquired immunity. So active acquired immunity means this immunological resistance produced by organs through the production of antibodies. So antibodies are produced from our body because some immunological response happens. So by the production of antibodies, it will occur. Okay, so we can say that production of antibodies, antibodies. In passive immunity does not require the production of antibodies. Here, the antibodies are not produced. Directly it is supplied to the body. Directly it is introduced into the body. And those antibodies will fight against microorganisms. Do you understand the difference? Here, active acquired immunity, the body will start producing antibodies and kills the microorganisms. Okay, so something is given so that the body will produce antibodies, and so the body will produce antibodies, and so it will act against the pathogens. But here in passive, they do not produce antibodies. They are directly introduced from external, from outside into the organ system. So from organisms, okay. So from outside it is given to here, okay. And this again it is classified into two: natural and artificial. Natural and artificial. Natural means some infection. We can say as infection. That is, a microorganism enters, Mycobacterium tubercle, or diphtherium tubercle, or streptococcus pneumoniae, whatever it is. Some microorganism enters. So what happens? Our body will produce antibodies. So here production of antibodies occur. So natural acquired immunity is, so a body, by the introduction of any infection is the good example. Infection is the example. Artificial means vaccination. So some vaccine, polio vaccine or some vaccine is given and it induces the body to produce antibodies. Okay, so but our body will produce antibodies. Okay, so vaccination, that is the example for artificial acquired immunity. Here, passive. Okay, in passive also we have natural and artificial. So natural passive immunity means, we said already that antibodies are not produced, it is directly supplied, isn't it? How it is directly supplied? By mother's milk. By mother's milk, antibody is directly given to the child, isn't it? So this is natural passive immunity. Here, the child does not produce any antibodies as its own, but the antibody is supplied from the mother's milk through placenta. It is given. So that is the natural. And artificial, when we say some, we can say as some injected material. Antibodies are directly injected. So injected, and that kills the organism. So antibody is not produced, it is injected from outside. So that is artificial. Here vaccine, it will induce the antibodies to produce, isn't it? Here antibodies are directly given. And it kills the microorganisms. This is the types of acquired immunity. One main important thing is immune response. Okay, actually we say as primary immune response and secondary immune response. Primary immune response and secondary immune response. Now, primary immune response means when a pathogen enters the body. So our body will think, our immune system will think, what type of organism is it? So what antibody should be produced? So it thinks, then first time when the pathogen enters, the immune system learns about that antigen and particular antibody is produced. Okay, but it is slow process. So immediately it will not. It is a slow process. Secondary immune responses, now again the same antigen, when it enters the body, our immune system will recognize the antigen. This antigen has entered our body earlier. It has entered our body earlier. Therefore, it immediately activates our cells and produces antibodies. It is somewhat quick in nature. So there will be a memory. I said already now, there will be a memory for this our immune system, for acquired immunity. When we are discussing, we told. So that memory will happen. So that is why it is said to be booster response. Booster response. Just to tell you an example, suppose, let it not happen, I am just telling you an example. So suppose in our home we are sleeping, okay, we are sleeping, suddenly a thief enters. A thief enters. So what do? Okay, a thief enters, he is entering, and we understand that he is there. So we couldn't react immediately, isn't it? Suddenly the thief enters, what he will have, whether he has a knife or anything, we don't know, isn't it? So it takes time for defending against him, to defend against him. So, but somehow we escaped, okay? Then we shouted, then he ran away, everything. Next day, what will you do? Next day, you will keep the log near the bed, or you will have chili powder near to your bed. So you will know, next time when the thief enters, take chili powder, put on him, isn't it? So immediate response, isn't it? The same thing happens in our immune system also. Okay, first time when an antigen enters the body, our body recognizes, it thinks which type of antibody should be produced, everything it thinks, and then the antibody is produced. It is a slow process, but it will, it is very active. It will kill the antigens. Okay, but that is called as primary immune response. Primary immune response. So when we speak about secondary immune response, secondary immune responses, next time when the same antigen enters our body, they understand, oh yes, this antigen has come earlier. So you see, we would have told, you would have heard many places, once if you get chicken pox, next time it won't come, isn't it? You would have heard chicken pox, once you are infected with chicken pox, the next time you will not get. What is the concept behind it? The same thing only. First time, the pox virus, when it enters our body, takes some time to act against it, and it takes time. But second time, it is entering, okay, it is entering our body, but our immune system understands that this is the virus, chickenpox virus, and what antibody should be produced, and it kills it. Okay, before we get fever or anything, it kills it. So secondary immune system is more, it is active. That is why we say booster response. So understand the concept of this immune response. Now let's discuss the organs involved in the immune system. So if we see the organs involved in this production, maturation and proliferation, that is multiplication of these cells, these immune cells, or these antibody producing cells. Okay, so origin, where it starts, origin, maturation and proliferation. So everything occurs in some organs, isn't it? So they are called as lymphoid organs. Lymphoid organs. So here, based on the function, they are classified into primary lymphoid organ and secondary lymphoid organ. Primary lymphoid organ are also called as central lymphoid organs, and secondary lymphoid organs are called as peripheral lymphoid organs. So these are very important. Primary, okay, for the production, the maturation of cells occur in primary only. Okay, the maturation of the cells occur in primary lymphoid organs. So then the antigens are trapped by secondary lymphoid organs. Okay, so the cells, T cells or B cells, all these antibody related cells, they are matured only in the primary lymphoid organs. But the antigens are trapped, they are killed, everything in secondary lymphoid organs. Okay, now let's discuss primary lymphoid organs in detail. So primary lymphoid organ, when we speak about primary lymphoid organ, the main places, okay, the location is bone marrow. Bone marrow. So we know bone marrow, the spongy substance present inside the bone where RBCs are produced. So bone marrow is very important part. And thymus. You would have learnt thymus in your 10th standard related with endocrine gland. Isn't it? Thymosin hormone is produced. Thymus. They are responsible for the production of lymphocyte, production and maturation of lymphocytes, bone marrow and thymus. In birds, if you see, bursa of fabricus in birds. They are also the organ of primary lymphoid organ in birds. Now, so these particular antigens are produced. What type of cells should be produced? Everything is done by this primary lymphoid organ. So if you see, B cells are matured. B cells are matured in bone marrow. You remember this. B cells. B lymphocyte cells are matured in bone marrow. So what will be thymus? Can you say? Yes. T lymphocytes. T cells are matured in thymus. Now, thymus. So let's discuss about thymus. Thymus in detail. Thymus, if you see, they are flat bilobed structure. So bilobed structure present above the heart. So if heart is present here, above it the thymus gland is present. Lungs, all. So above the heart, thymus gland is present. Now, when you see, it has two layers, outer cortex and inner medulla. Outer cortex and inner medulla. So this cortex is densely packed with immature lymphocytes, immature T cells. Okay, immature T cells. So thymocytes, we say thymocytes. So in outer layer of the thymus gland, immature T cells, that is thymocytes, are present. When it comes to medulla, mature thymocytes are present. Mature thymocytes are present. It secretes the hormone called thymosin, which stimulates T cells to mature. T cells to mature and act like antibody. So thymosin is very important. And this thymus gland is very active in neonatal period, that is child and pre-adolescent period. Okay, pre-adolescent period. So thymus gland is very active. That's why we say for kids nothing will happen. Why? Because thymus gland is active for them. Okay, this is next primary lymphoid organ is bone marrow. As we said already, it is a spongy substance which is present inside the bone. So spongy portion of the bone, we can say, and they contain stem cells. So these stem cells are called as hemopoietic cells. So either they remain as stem cells itself or they form as blood cells. So this is also a very a site of maturation of B cells. So this is very important. Other than that, there are secondary lymphoid organs. Secondary lymphoid organs where the action takes place, where the antigens are trapped by these antibodies. Secondary lymphoid organs. I'll just list out. When we see many secondary lymphoid organs, tonsils is a secondary lymphoid organs. Adenoid in mouth, it It is a secondary lymphoid organ. Peyer's patches in intestine portion. So that is then malt, mucosa associated lymphoid tissue. Malt. Then galt, gut associated lymphoid tissue. Then BALT, B-A-L-T, bronchi associated lymphoid tissue. Spleen present here. It's a very good source of acting against the antigens. Okay, spleen. Then we have a lymph node, which is very important. So when we speak about lymph node, the structure is given in your book. Even then, the lymph node, the lymphatic system, when we speak, the overall, fully the bodies, we have so many lymph nodes present. They produce a secretion called lymphatic fluid. These limbs are connected with lymphatic vessels. Actually, when you see one lymph node, it has 3 layers: cortex, paracortex, medulla. So when the liquid, the lymph, it flows through totally lymph node, and all antigens are trapped. So to understand about the lymph node, you just imagine, suppose if you have any problem in the head portion or any injuries here, we can see some round body like here, isn't it? So in neck region we see neck, or under the chin we see. Sometimes in armpit, if we have any injury, that is wound or anything, it has become septic, means we get a lymph node in armpit. Same way in groin, between the legs. So any injuries in the legs, it creates lymph node in the groin. It means that action is going on. Action is going on to kill those antigens. Okay, understand that? So you need not to worry. So these are secondary lymphoid organs. So when we study about immunology, we can understand very well about how our body works against antigens, how our body effectively kills the external organisms. Let's discuss some other topics in our next video. Thank you. This is the primary lymphoid organ in birds, Bursa of Fabricus. This is the primary lymphoid organ in man, thymus, which is present above the heart, bilobed structure, and you can see it is behind the sternum. Other than primary lymphoid organ thymus, we have lymph nodes, spleen, Peyer's patches present in the body as secondary lymphoid organs. This is the structure of lymph node. It has 3 zones: cortex, paracortex and medulla. The cortex consists of B lymphocytes, macrophages and follicular dendritic cells. Paracortex zone is beneath the cortex, which is richly populated by T lymphocytes. The innermost zone is medulla, which is sparsely populated by lymphocytes, but many plasma cells are present.